This episode is brought to you from the Sensei Pickle Jar Studios, where they teach you how to use all that money you have saved in your pickle jar over the years towards your financial goals created through the Sensei Financial Roadmap tool. Click on the link in the podcast description to learn more.
Welcome back, everybody, to the next episode of Surviving Life's Pickles. I'm Scott Martin, your host, joined today with my beautiful wife, Hillary, as co-host.
Hello, everybody.
And Gary Fisher.
Hi, everyone.
So Gary comes to us today, and if you have been in the recovery space, Gary Fisher should be a common name with you, and we'll get into a little bit of that here in just a second. But before we start rolling with this episode, we're going to start it off today with some gratitude. And Hill, I'm going to have you go first today.
Oh, I'm first? Okay. I am so grateful for connection and for the people that are in my life today and good friends like Gary Fisher, who's been a longtime friend. I'm so grateful to have you here, Gary. I am so grateful for my family, and I'm just exploding with gratitude today.
Awesome.
Wow, how sweet.
Yeah. All right, Gary, we'll throw it to you.
Wow. What am I grateful for? Well, lots. But, as I sit here, I'm just grateful for recovery, right? I think that, I've been sober for 38 years, and I remember those first 38 days. I remember a guy coming into a meeting and saying he was an alcoholic and that he was a grateful alcoholic. And that was I just couldn't grasp that. And today I get to grasp it fully, right? I get to be with you guys. I get to do stuff like this. I think I'm more appreciative for all of the things that come in my life, just because I know how fleeting it can be and how difficult it is. And sometimes I think we're the lucky ones.
I think
right?
so.
Being the recovering guys. Yeah. So men and women.
Well, and today for mine, I kind of thought about this morning as we're getting ready, and there are so many things that I am grateful for, but really kind of just back, and I was thinking kind of the same lines as you, Gary's. I'm just so grateful for this recovery journey. It has changed my whole path in life. It has changed my experience. It has changed how I interact with people. Even last night, we had a little thing where my little boy was really scared he was going to get in trouble for something. And after we talked about it and he realized he wasn't really going to get yelled at or in trouble, he's like, oh, that wasn't so bad. But a few years ago, it would have been a different story. I would have yelled. I would have got upset. And so I'm extremely grateful for the recovery journey and learning these skills and just learning to be a better person.
Yeah, well.
Yeah.
So, well, everybody, Gary Fisher today, like I said, he has been in the recovery space for quite a while. So Gary mentioned he's been 38 years in recovery, which is an amazing feat. It's awesome.
Huge.
Few things that Gary's done in his life is board of directors for the Utah Council for Crime Prevention, the Recovery Management Alliance, the National Association of Addiction and Treatment Providers. He was there for 12 years. And he recently was awarded the Nelson Bradley Career Achievement Award. And what that award is that award recognizes the career-long achievements of individuals who have made a significant contribution to the addiction treatment and recovery services. And with that, Gary, I mean, I've had some interactions with you, not nearly as many as Hillary. She's known you for quite a while, but you truly are one of these pioneers that has changed the recovery space for people like us. And you've really kind of blazed the trails and really started some amazing things in your career. So I just want to say thank you before we get started for everything that you've done.
Yeah.
You're welcome. And it's weird, right? Because you start your life and you get passionate about something. And for me, that was recovery. And so you just continue to do the next indicated thing. I would always hear people say, well, let's do the next right thing. But boy, when you're sitting there at the fork in the road, oftentimes you don't know what the next right thing is.
Yeah.
But I think that the next indicated thing was easier for me. And so, you know, you go along and you do it long enough, and they give you this career award, and which is incredibly flattering. I mean,
So well deserved, Gary.
well, you're kind. Some you get to see the people who have received the award before me, and I can tell you, if you put the names up there, mine would be the one that didn't fit. So that's
I doubt that.
Yeah. Oh, well, Gary, we would like to just kind of dive in. We kind of want to hear a little bit about your story. You know, you are 38 years recovered, but let's talk about how you got to that point, and then, you know, from there, kind of the things that inspired you to go down the path that you've gone down the last almost 40 years.
sure. Wow.
I want you to think back.
Where
Yeah.
where did you come from?
Where
What-
did I come from?
Yeah, and how was it?
So, you know, it was an interesting piece. I was a kid who grew up here in Salt Lake City, and we were not part of the predominant culture. And so, you know, I grew up my whole life trying to fit in. And I can assure the people who are listening, it wasn't that the people out, you know, my friends that I grew up with, it wasn't that they were excluding me from things. I just felt a little bit different. And I don't know if that's because I wasn't part of the culture. You know, I don't know if it's because I didn't go participate in a lot of the after school activities, whatever it was. But I kind of made it my life's mission, right, that I was going to fit in.
Yeah.
And so I think that was, you know, you would hear people talk about when they had that first drink or did that first drug, and the sky got bluer, and everything was more hunky dory. And but for me, you know, I was just trying to fit in. So, and I figured out pretty early on that if you could hit a baseball, they'd pick you on the team. And you know, and if somebody said, "Hey, you know, we're going to go up the canyon and go to a keg," you know, for me that was hooking up.
Yeah.
I just got to go be friends with them, and so I think that's kind of how it got started. And I got really good at it, right? I mean, I could fit in. I had, you know, I think it's funny. You guys will talk about longevity. I'm about to go to my 50th high school reunion, and they've asked me to say a few things, and I've been thinking about it. And one of the things that I remember back, I think there were folks that were, you know, scarred by that high school experience. I think
Yeah.
there were people that, you know, they kind of just navigated it okay. And for me, it ended up being pretty good. And that was a miracle for a kid who started out so fear-based, so insecure.
Mhm.
And alcohol did that for me, right? I was, alcohol would tamp back that fear. And of course, you know, the story is a little's good, a lot's better. And so I started to drink, and you know, alcohol was first. Marijuana was kind of my senior year in high school. I got to college. Cocaine was next. And I remember a gentleman giving me my first bump and saying, you know, it's not addictive. And,
I think that's pretty common, actually.
Yeah.
Gary. I think that's what they all say.
That's what they said about Oxycontins
Yeah.
too. So
So, and the funny part is, I don't even think I knew what the word addiction meant.
yeah.
Right. I mean, I'm a 20-year-old high school or a college kid, maybe 21, 22. And I was just kind of off to the races, right?
Yeah.
And a couple watershed events. Of course, what comes along with drinking too much and drugging too much is that the things that are important to you in your life start to fall away. And that was my family. That was any sort of jobs. I was a pretty good high school athlete. I actually got a scholarship to go to college, and lost that pretty quickly. And I remember a gentleman. I was kind of behind the eight ball a little bit financially and in other ways. And kind of this watershed moment is that you know, I was around people who used drugs. I did drugs, and you know, I needed to figure out a way to pay for my drugs, and I figured that out by being able to sell a few drugs, right? And it's so innocuous to begin with. You know, it starts out, it's pretty It's pretty vanilla, bag of weed here,
Hmm.
a little bit of cocaine there, and but pretty soon you're a drug dealer.
Yeah.
And I was a pretty gregarious guy. I could show up on time, and those were traits that a lot of people who sold drugs did not have. And so I became very good at it.
Yeah.
And I became so good at it that the federal government took notice. And on October 29th, 1986, which coincides with my sobriety date, they arrested me for being part of, at least at the time, what was the largest illegal drug enterprise in the history of the state of Utah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Huh.
I'm happy to tell your listeners that record has since been broken.
I would hope so.
Yeah.
Well, but at the same time, it sucks. It's been broken.
Yeah. No, I'm okay with it. Very happy.
I say Utah's grown maybe a little bit since then. Too.
Yeah, no, that's for sure. But the part of it is wow, what a comeuppance, right? This kind of this kid who grew up and navigated high school, navigated uh, college athlete, and kind of this can't miss kid, and here I was being arrested for being part of this drug enterprise. That it just didn't really compute, right?
Yeah.
But it does tell us really how far drugs and alcohol can take us, because at that point, I didn't really speak to anybody in my family. I had had a marriage that had lasted 5 months. I had fallen away from my college career, and call it what you want, but I was a drug dealer, and so I ended up getting the opportunity to go to treatment, and this probably, it's a funny thing. It's funny how God works, but it was the part that really kind of defined the rest of my life. And it was because I got into treatment and I loved it.
Yeah.
Right. It was the first time I remember sitting down and I would listen to somebody talk about one of their issues, whether it was an issue with family, whether it was an issue with the drugs themselves, whether it was an issue with just fear and insecurity. And, I could see in them what I couldn't see in myself. And I loved it. And I thought, wow, this is great. And so, I go through the treatment piece and have high hopes that, I could probably make this a career. And, I go to court and my, the counselor's there and my family is there. We're reconciling at this point, and it's kind of thumbs up. And I stand up in front of the chief federal judge for the District of Utah at the time. His name was Bruce Jenkins, and everybody gave these great orations. And he asked me if I had anything to say, and I told him I was incredibly remorseful. That what I had done had taken that to get all of these people here, and I felt very badly about it. And he looked at me and he said, "Well, the time for feeling badly is over, Mr. Fisher." And he said, "We're going to sentence you to 5 years in a federal penitentiary." And he said, "And if I have my way, I'll make sure you do every day."
Wow.
And I will tell the audience about Chief Judge Bruce Jenkins as he's a man of his word.
Hmm.
And so he made sure of that. But you think, oh man, that's horrific, right?
Yeah.
But it was, man, it was an experience. And the experience for me was that, if you're born with great privilege, and we all are,
Mm-hmm.
we live like kings. Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I think I saw a thing on Instagram the other day that if you take a hot showers weren't, people didn't take hot showers until about 100 years ago.
Yeah.
Right. So you think about the history of mankind, right?
Yeah.
And so literally when I tell you this, we live like kings. And I got to go to this experience, and I, for a lot of these men, 3 hots in a cot was as good as it ever got.
Yeah.
And it really steeled me to that, no matter what, when I got out of this, I would never do anything to put myself in a situation like this again.
Hmm.
And there was some recovery in prison, not much, but there was some. And I managed to stay sober all the way through that 5-year excursion, and got out. And the truth of the matter is I couldn't find a job.
Yeah.
So I tried.
because it was a felony.
It was a felony.
right?
Yeah.
It was a felony offense. And all the people who say, "Oh yeah, when you get out, fish, don't worry, I'll hire you up, right? You know, got this." And of course, you all of a sudden you show up on their door and they're like, "Whoa,
Oh,
yeah, this is uncool."
yeah.
And I got it pretty quickly, right? And I didn't want to put them in that position. You know, my problem didn't need to become their problem. And so, at any rate, long story short, a friend of mine gave me a job as the midnight to 8, the overnight person at a treatment center.
Yeah.
It was St. Benedict's. They had a little facility on about 11th East and 39th South, right by St. Mark's Hospital there. And I would work midnights. And kind of the big break for me, I don't know if it was a big break or not. I had one day this gentleman walks down and it's about 8 o'clock in the morning and I'm getting ready to get off shift. And he said, "Who's Gary Fisher?" And so I kind of raised my hand, right? I'm sure I looked like Freddy Krueger, right? I mean, it's, you've been up all night.
Oh, yeah.
And it was, I won't say it was, let's just say we got a little bit of a rugged crowd there, right? And I raised my hand. He said, "Hey, can we talk?" And he said, and I said, "Sure." So we walked in and he introduced himself to me. He was an official with the hospital. And we sat down and he said, "When people call here at night, what do you talk about?"
Mhm.
And I said, "Excuse me, sir." I said, I'm not sure where this is going." And he said, "Well, when people call here at night, what do you talk about?" And what he was talking about were people calling, inquiring about admissions. And of course, between midnight and 8, there were no admissions people there.
Mhm.
And I said, "Oh." And I said, "Well, I said, I'm unsure." And I said, "Why are you asking?" And he said, "Well, we've had an inordinate amount of people who've admitted. And when people admit here, we ask them why, and they give your name."
Oh.
And I said, and so I go, "Well, that's a good thing, isn't it?" And he said, "Well, it can be." He said, "It just depends on what you're talking about and what you're promising them." And I said, "Oh." I said, "Well, I talk about joy." And I said, and he looked at me, and I'll never forget the look on his face was like, "Joy?"
Joy.
And I said, "Yeah." I said, because at the end of our drinking and using, there's no joy.
Mhm.
We just use and drink to use and drink, right? To push away the pain. But I said I'd found a way, and the way for me was through the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous and through treatment. And I found joy. And he said, "Joy." And I go, "Yeah, joy." And the funny part, I always thought was funny about this story was St. Ben's had this little admission script that you were supposed to read.
Mm.
And of course, the midnight and 8 guys, they never see that, right?
Right.
We've never seen a script, right?
Yeah.
So he said, "What about the script?" And I told him, I said, "Well, sir, I've never seen a script." But I said, "I'm just happy to have a job, right?" So I said, "If you want me to read from the script, happy to." And he said, "Well, no." I said, "Don't worry about it." And so, and a couple of days later, I got a call, and he was Mr. Kaler again, and he was going to give me a job in the admissions department.
Okay.
And I told him, I said, "Mr. Kaler," I said, I don't think I'm qualified to do admissions." And he said, "Well," he said, "you might be the only guy here who is qualified to do admissions." And I said, "What about the script?" And he goes, "We're getting rid of that." And so we talked about joy, right?
Yeah.
So, and I tried to carry that through, one job led to another, and really recovery was always about attraction for me. As I moved to different jobs, I worked for several different facilities before I ended up at Cirque Lodge, which was, just the unbelievable opportunity for me, right? Because one thing about Cirque is it's attractive,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
And, a lot of people would come into treatment and they were reticent about reticent about doing treatment, reticent about recovery, reticent about the 12 steps.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden they would see the lodge and they'd go, well, I can do this. And I'd say, yeah, I bet you can, right?
Right.
And that's what we tried to do. We just tried to make recovery fun, because at the end of our, like I said, at the end of our drinking and using, there's no fun.
Right. Well, and that brings up, I was scrolling Instagram a minute this morning, and there was a little saying this morning that says, once you have overcome your alcoholism in a world that is obsessed with it, you can achieve anything.
Mhm.
And just hearing your story really exemplifies that, because it really is. Once you overcome that in a world that is so obsessed with something, and you become not the norm, and then you excel to what you've done. And, now in your story, you've become, this icon at the Cirque Lodge and started something fantastic there.
Well, what I get a lot of credit for, but one of the things that I think that we understood early on, and really this is a shout out to Dave Beck and Beverly Resch and Richard Losey, the gentleman who owns it, right, is that, we got it that if we took care of the staff, everybody says, oh, let's take care of the customer, right?
Mhm.
But the fact of the matter is if you take care of the staff, they're the ones that were going to take care of the residents, right? They're the ones that were going to take. So the old piece, you can't give what you don't have, right? But you can give what you do have. And so what you wanted to make sure was that our employees were throwing good stuff out there, rather than, because, you can do damage as well. And I do think those were the things that, kind of separated us, was that we wanted to make sure that the people were, it was a good work environment, that it was good chemistry, that, that we had a lot of fun. I used to walk in and say, everybody ready to get sober today?
Right.
And then people would laugh, right? But I was serious.
Right. Well, and that speaks a lot. I mean, from what I know, you employ a lot of people in recovery.
Yep, sure.
I mean, a good portion of people that have worked through there, a lot of them have actually went through that program.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, when you get in there and again, it's about joy, right? You go in, and don't get me wrong, work's work, right? You have, there are a lot of things that go along with every work environment that are difficult, right? I mean, it's one of the reasons you get a paycheck.
Right.
If it was just recreation, but it's not. And I think the wild part that's, and we would talk about this with everybody, with all of the new hires that were coming in. It's like, this is, people have come here because it's a life and death situation. And it's really hard, right? Because you walk through the halls of Cirque or any of the treatment centers, and the people all look pretty good, right? On the outside, we all, we recover pretty quickly.
Yeah. Once the detox is over and all of that, the light kind of comes back on in their eyes and you can kind of see it. But the pain is still deep down
The
underneath.
pain is, In
oftentimes.
fact, you haven't even really scratched it yet.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you guys a good story. Well, I don't know that it's a good story, but I remember being in treatment, and I had back when I was in treatment, you could smoke, right? And so the doctors would come in and smoke with you, and the counselors would, it was funny, right? It was like one of those ads you see on TV, right?
Yeah.
And
The world was.
yeah. So, and I remember looking at this physician, his name was Hartman, and I said, Dr. Hartman, I said, do I look better? And he said, he looked at me and kind of, no. And I asked this physician that question probably I got the opportunity to be in treatment for 60 days, and which was a long time back in in 1986. Today it's kind of more of the norm.
The norm, yeah.
But back then that was a long time. And and finally, after a while, I just quit asking him, right? I just figured he was just kind of keeping me under the thumb. And because that's who we are, right? We don't really believe that people are telling us the truth.
Yeah.
Right.
That they're just trying to manipulate us one way or the other. And what I would tell your listeners is, no, they're not. They're telling you the truth. It's just that sometimes the truth is so hard to hear, right?
That is very true.
And then one day we were sitting there, and he looked at me and he said, "You going to ask me?" And I said, "Ask you what?" And he said, "You look better." And I said, "Well, do I look better?" And he said, "You do." And the interesting part was, fast forward like 5 or 6 years, and again, I'm working the midnight to eights, and I would see this gentleman who came in who was really physically very debilitated, and he was in the treatment center for a month, maybe 2 months. And one day he came walking by in the morning, and he looked at me and he said, "Hey, Gare." And I said, "Hey, John." And I took about 3 more steps, and I could see the joy in his face.
Mhm.
And I went, "Oh my goodness." I said, "That's what Dr. Hartman saw."
Mhm.
And I mean, you viscerally change, right?
Yeah.
And so it's, it was an interesting piece. So we get healthy pretty quick. And, and sometimes your employees will look at the person, and as alcoholics, we're tough to take, right? We are. We can make a bad situation terrible. And, one of the things about it is, we would talk about, when you see this resident, envision every resident like they're on a gurney with tubes in their nose and pieces, IVs in their arms. And because that's how sick that person is. They don't get to residential treatment. I mean, residential treatment's the ICU of chemical
Addiction.
dependency, of addiction.
Yeah.
And so, but sometimes it's easy to forget that, right? And it's really easy for the residents to forget it, right?
Mhm.
They come in and all of a sudden it's like, okay, well, hey, I've overreacted and I feel really good now. And now we haven't, nothing's really changed in a week. They've been drinking and using for years. And so, and we could have those conversations, and, honesty is, hopefully honesty with tact. Honesty without tact is kind of like brutality.
Right.
Right. And so I think, one of the things that we wanted to do was be honest, but be kind.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So use that compassion when you're delivering the hard truths.
Yeah. There you go.
Yeah, I definitely remember my first detox, going in thinking, "Oh, I just need to get off the drugs and then I'll be fine. I just need to detox and then everything will be good." And so going into detox, got myself better physically, and then coming out of it, and the parents and the doctors and the counselor there kind of sat me down and was like, "Okay, now you need to go to treatment." And I'm like, What? I was just in treatment. I detoxed. I'm off the drugs. I'm good now, right?" It didn't even really register that there was more to it after that.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, I heard the other day that Cirque has had 8,500 clients now, which is a miracle.
Yeah,
I think
it's a lot of people.
when I got there, I think they were on resident number 14. But I can tell you, Hillary, that all 8,500 of them had that moment where they thought, "Okay, I'm good to go."
Yeah.
And it was long before they ever discharged, or should have discharged anyway. So
Yeah.
anyway,
So in the recovery, so you were at Cirque for what, 20 something years?
23.
23 years. That is a long time. And that's amazing. And so being in the recovery space, I know you trailblazed a lot of things with the state, with the government, with other treatment centers. Can you tell us a little bit about those types of things? I know that there was one thing where I heard that you trailblazed the opportunity for other felons to be able to work in treatment centers. Is this true?
Yeah, that's well, it was myself and a gentleman by the name of Gil Hallows and Sean McMillan, who runs First Step House, and Dave Beck, and the Department of Human Services had come out, and basically they had deemed substance abuse disorder individuals as vulnerable adults. And so being a vulnerable adult, they they treated it much like an adolescent. So you had to clear a background check to
be able to work there.
Yeah, to be able to work there. And so one of the things that, of course, that was going to DQ a lot of us, including me. So the part of it is the Department of Human Services came out and said, well, okay, if you've been out for like 10 years, then we won't worry about that group. And it was really this group of people that came together, Gil and Sean and Dave and myself, and said, look, we're really what we are is we're small business people.
Mhm.
And, we're only going to hire people, hopefully, that are going to make positive impacts. So, what you should do is vet the leaders,
Mhm.
vet the leaders in the program and let us vet our employees.
Hmm.
And it's kind of America, right?
Yeah.
It's like I'm not going to, I'm not going to KO my program by putting people in there that are dangerous to the residents. I mean, that seems like common sense. And, the Department of Human Services, to their credit, made those changes. I think there is, I think there now is like a 2-year, you got to be out and back on the street and in society for a couple of years. And, it seemed like common sense at the time. And, but yeah, for a lot of our individuals, their ability to come to work. And I remember it was kind of a good one. I got to sit with this gentleman who he worked for Berkshire Hathaway. He worked for Warren Buffett.
Wow.
And he had come out, and Cirque had hired him as a consultant to help us organizationally. And I remember he was looking at this resume. And I mean, this is a guy who sat next to Warren Buffett, right?
Yeah.
I mean, so this is a
Big time.
big time opportunity. And he saw this resume, and he kind of put it over in this pile that I knew we were never going to look at again. And I said, can I ask you what's in that pile, or what put that gentleman in that pile?
Mhm.
And he says, oh, well, this guy's been to jail.
Hmm.
And I remember looking at him, and his first name was Ed. And I said, well, Ed, I said, actually, that can be a job qualification here, not. And so I think it was a good experience for that gentleman, and hopefully we did. Again, you can't give what you don't have. And so I think a big piece of that recovering experience, is important because I think it helps people with an empathetic response. And that didn't mean that I didn't hire people that weren't in recovery. Actually, that was never a question.
Yeah.
It seems like the people who would come and would interview for us were in recovery, or it certainly attracted that group. But, I would oftentimes tell the counselors is we're all pretty good at being addicts.
Mhm.
I need somebody to tell us how to not be an addict.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And so many of especially the primary therapists, they weren't in recovery. Although somewhere along the line, they had something that connected them to some sort of addiction, whether it was chemical dependency or a process addiction or whatever it might have been. But so it wasn't, it's not a prerequisite, but it's not a bad trait to have in our industry. So
No.
Kind of reminds me of the story of the addict in the hole. I'm sure you're probably familiar with it. So there's an addict that falls down in the hole, and he's yelling, somebody help me, somebody help me. And a priest comes by and sits next to the hole, and the priest says, I'll pray for you. We'll pray together, and then maybe that'll get you out of the hole. And so they pray together, and the priest looks down and he's like, well, you're still in the hole, but do you feel better? And he says, well, yeah, I feel a little better. And he walks on his way, but the addict is still in the hole. And then a therapist comes by, talks to him, asks him, how did you get in the hole? What got you there? How do you feel being in the hole? And then he asks the addict, well, do you feel better? And he says, yeah, but I'm still in the hole. And the therapist walks by. And then another addict comes by, and he yells down. He's like, hey, do you need help? And he's like, yes, I need help. So the addict out of the hole jumps down in the hole with the other person. And he says, what are you doing? Now we're both stuck in this hole. And the addict looks over at him and he says, it's okay. I've been here before
Mm.
and I know the way out. So
I love that.
I love that story. I've always enjoyed that one.
I know the way out.
Yeah.
Mm.
So, it's the having that personal experience. Well, it's not necessarily, like you said, it needs to be a qualification, but it definitely can be a good one
Yeah.
because having that personal experience and being able to relate in that way, I know it definitely helped me when I was in treatment and having other people that had been through it before.
Amen.
It
I think
definitely
so.
gives you that hope.
I agree.
So, yeah.
So, what are a couple other things, Gary, that has been just really amazing that you've been part of to watch over the last few years in your career?
Well, I mean, there's, you would think it would be like getting this award, right? And I've been fortunate over the course. It's a funny piece. Once you get a little older, unfortunately, you don't get these awards when you're like in your 30s, right?
Yeah.
What they're kind of telling you is, Gary, you're pretty done, right? And we better give him an award before he dies, right?
Oh.
And so you would, though, and I mean, and don't get me wrong, I am incredibly flattered. I mean, this is an award that's given by my colleagues. And so, and I promise you guys that there are so many people, not only in the state of Utah, but across our entire country, who are deserving of career achievement awards. And I know many of them, and I'm sure I don't know them all. So to be given this award was great. But I think the things that, I mean, you guys would laugh, but I had a young man call me who was doing a fundraiser, and he had got a foundation together, and they put people through treatment.
Mhm.
And I promise you, I remember being in the office with his father, and his father bawling because he was sure his son was going to die.
Yeah.
And, so to see this young man not only surviving, but thriving and giving back, and he's found this to be his life's passion, I mean, those are, and again, it was, I've pretty much just been a spectator. It's been the people like, Bev and Francine and Aaron and the other therapists who were really, I know you had Jake Kennison on, the Jakes of the world, right? That, really reach into that hole. And not only do they know the way out, but they help pull people out, right? And so, I mean, those are the miracles. And somebody that, I was walking, I was with my brother, and we were walking along the street, and I had one of the former resident who came up, and I don't think my brother's always been, I think, proud of the fact that I got better, and
Right.
and so, but has a hard time, kind of would have a hard time, as everybody would, understanding the impact that really treatment has had on people's lives. And so, and it's like I said, I probably get a lot of credit that I didn't really deserve, but, had one of the former residents come up and give me a hug, right? And just so grateful to be in recovery, and to not only to, like, as Hill pointed out, to been in the hole, but to have been able to climb out and feel that somehow maybe I was one of those hands that helped pull him out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Well, that brings up the question. I know you've touched on a few stories that have really touched you, and there's probably hundreds that you can think of that just warm your heart, and miracles that you have seen over the last 40 years. But is there one or two in particular that really stand out, that when somebody asked you, what recovery really is, these individuals or these experiences that you got to have with them stand out first?
Well, I told this story at Cirque for a long time, and And, we talk about recovery being a program of attraction. And one of the things, Cirque has a lot of amenities. And so, but when I came to Cirque, I was this 12-step guy, right?
Mm-hmm.
And worked the steps. And, I was, experiential therapy. I was like, well, I'm not sure about this. Right? And so, there's a good story about experiential therapy. But we had a hair salon.
Hmm.
Okay.
And I had this, and I'll never forget, you guys, you'd laugh. It was July 24th. And July 24th in Utah is a big holiday.
Yeah.
And so, and Cirque wasn't very big at this time. And so I was kind of doing the admissions desk and answering the phones, and the other folks were off on the, taking the day as a holiday. And we had a young woman who was coming into care. And so I went out to the airport to pick her up.
Mm-hmm.
And when I got her, she was, I was there, got her stuff from, baggage claim, put it in the car. And literally, I remember driving down and, talked with her. Her name was Evie.
Mm-hmm.
And she, she came in and she was in detox for a few days. And the only way I can really describe Evie is she was just pretty much a sad sack, right? Just didn't have a lot of joy in her life. You couldn't see any, in fact.
Yeah.
And again, so one of the things that they would do with the residents early on was they would take them to the salon, right? And they would kind of do their hair and help them with
Clean them up a little.
Clean them up a little, right?
Yeah.
That's exactly it. And I remember, and it's so funny, all of the things that you would remember. But I remember walking out, or I was walking down the hallway, and here was Evie coming out of the salon that I wasn't a big fan of, right? I just thought it was too much foo-foo. Yeah. And she walked out and she looked at me and she said, and she put her hands over her chest like this. Oh, made me emotional. I'm telling you this story. But she put her hands on and she goes, oh, look, Mr. Fisher. She said, I'm beautiful.
Mm.
And I remember saying, oh, yes, Evie, you're beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
And, it was funny. It was this piece that changed her. Mm-hmm. It changed her whole attitude about how she saw herself. When you think it would be like some gigantic therapeutic experience, but you just never know where the people were going to get it. And I haven't talked to Evie in years, but I did talk to her for several years. And so I always have my fingers crossed that she's still sober. But I never, we talk about connection, and it was never lost on me how all these little ways to connect, they become the important parts of recovery. It's not some award somewhere.
Yeah.
It's talking to somebody in the hallway, remembering their name, talking about how their kids are doing, talking about this gentleman, about how his son is doing. And I can only imagine the joy and seeing families turned around, right? Yeah. That was, and I know it worked. It turned my family around. Yeah. Right. So,
well, we've talked about it here. There was and I always forget this guy's name, but he was talking about, he's a grief counselor, but in his talk that we listened to on this podcast, he was talking about the human connection. And that is one of the biggest parts of recovery. But in grief, as he was talking, is you need to share your story so that you can, share that story with somebody else so they can then connect to you and you can share that moment of connection of, sharing your story and be vulnerable with them. And then that allows them to then be vulnerable and share back. And then you get this connection. And that is the true healing. That's the true piece of recovery, is when you get that piece of connection together at that vulnerable moment as humans.
Mhm.
And I think that's super powerful.
Well, and addiction is so disconnecting
Mm.
from everything and isolating, and to gain that connection back. I mean, I was a I'm still a hairdresser, so I've done hair for over 20 years, and that story with Evie just totally hit
Yeah.
me, because we call ourselves the unlicensed therapists, because people will sit down in our chairs and tell us their whole life story and tell us their problems and ask for advice. I definitely have seen it multiple times, but the joy that we can get by just helping them to feel more confident about themselves and to feel beautiful. My sweet little grandma, she's 84 years old. Sorry, grandma, if that's not how old you are, but I know, yeah, she's in her 80s. And I have the great pleasure that I get to go up and do her hair for her about every 3 to 4 weeks. And just even that alone, I know, just helps her to feel better. So I love that you guys implemented the salon into the treatment center. I went to multiple treatment centers and none of them had a salon. I know that. So, but that, I mean, that is just a huge aspect, just to even clean them up a little
Oh, man.
bit and to help them have that little bit of boost inside to feel, better about themselves. Because even as much as I hate it, of the outside appearance, and how we present ourselves is a big factor in this world. And, it's just, it definitely goes to say how much just a little bit of doing somebody's hair or giving them, that little bit of boost can help.
Well, I can assure you guys it changed it for Evie.
Yeah.
Did it change it for you? You liked the salon after that moment.
Well, I accepted the salon.
Yeah.
I said, okay, the salon can stay.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, that's and it's funny, right? Because we have all these great therapists and I mean helicopters and gyms and horses and I mean really a shout out one of the greatest gardens in the treatment industry,
Yeah,
right?
beautiful
But it
garden.
was
One of the greatest gardens in Utah.
yeah, there you go.
They have a beautiful garden.
Yeah. And but this moment, right? And I'm sure if I sat down and thought about it, there's really the joy, right? There's been 100 moments like that, if not 1,000. And the nice part is obviously I got a financial paycheck to do the job that they gave me, and hopefully I exceeded their expectations. But I don't think the financial paycheck was ever as big as the emotional paycheck.
Yeah.
So
That's
Yeah.
amazing.
I mean, that's one reason we started this. It's, helping other people was a big part of it.
We say it all the time. If we can help even just one person, that's all we need. That's all we hope for.
yeah.
So
Well, hopefully we've done that today.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, well, before we kind of get out of this, Gary, you've been in the business a long time. You've seen a lot of hardships. You've seen a lot of wins. What are 3 or 4 things that you can come up with, somebody that's possibly struggling, or even somebody that has a family member that is struggling? Maybe some words of wisdom, maybe some guidance, or maybe some things that they can start looking at.
Yeah, I think that if I could, for the identified patient, right, for the person who's, we're usually so we're usually so deep in it that we can't see our way out of the hole.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, so oftentimes my advice would go to the families. I used to get the opportunity. One of the great pieces was I got to speak to the family at the start of every family week, and I would tell a little bit of our story. And when I say our story, the story of my family, and so, I think it's amazing how addiction really is a family disease. And so, if you're a family member listening today, and you get to see this broadcast, and you you have somebody who's struggling, they're probably not going to reach out for help. So it's almost incumbent upon the family member to be the one that reaches out.
Mhm.
And I think, the families will come to treatment, and they want every treatment center in America to fix their loved one. And if they fix their loved one, then that family dynamic is going to be great. And of course, that's just not true.
Yeah.
And so it becomes this part of the family member to start to reach out, and the family member starting to do their own work. And pretty soon, if that happens, what my experience is that that's when the addict alcoholic would, start to become curious, right? Start to become interested in doing their own work. And, and so it's just like anything else, we're not experts, most of us who bring a loved one to a hospital or to a treatment center, I mean, we go in there, and the example I would give you, if it was cancer,
Mhm.
we would walk in and we would see the oncologist, and we'd say, well, doc, what do we need to do? And the oncologist would tell us what the treatment plan was going to be, and we would do that treatment plan unfailingly,
Mhm.
right? We would follow it to a T.
Most people would.
Most people would.
Yeah.
That's right. If they had the ability to follow it, they would.
Yeah.
But it's amazing how, with chemical dependency, with substance use disorder, with addiction in general, it's kind of like we'll get one of the experts to say, okay, this is going to be the treatment plan, and the family or the patient will go, well, we don't need to quite do that, right? I mean, this
don't need to
90
go that
meetings in
far.
90 days, how
Yeah.
about 75?
Yeah.
And they want a bargain, right? And it's one of, and what I would tell your listeners is it's cancer,
Mhm.
it's cancer.
It is a
And
disease.
It is a disease. And here's the treatment plan, reach out, find the expert. A lot of people, I always hear them say, well, these guys aren't as good, or these people aren't as good, or I don't know about that. But I really don't know one addiction counselor who's not in it for the right reason,
Yeah.
right? I mean, we all got here because there was some sort of precipitating event, usually either in our own lives or in the lives of somebody that's close to us. And nobody gets into human services because they're going to get wealthy.
Yeah.
That's just not not happening. And so, what I would say to the family members is like, if we're waiting for the loved one who's in trouble to reach out, it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
And sometimes that feels unfair, right? And it feels unfair as a family member. Why? Why do I have to do this? And the truth of the matter is, you don't. But your loved one probably won't get better if you don't.
That's great advice.
Yeah.
Great advice.
Yeah. So if you have a family member that is struggling, and you say that they're not gonna reach out for help, do you have any advice on how to, they're adults, they can choose their own path, they can refuse to go to treatment, things like that? What are your suggestions on maybe help coax the addict or alcoholic to seek treatment?
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that, there's an old saying that help is doing for someone what they can't do for themselves, and enabling is doing something for somebody that they won't do for themselves.
Mhm.
And so it's amazing how much we as family members, I certainly saw this in my career, we're not helping our loved ones do something they can't. We're helping our loved ones do something they won't.
Mhm.
And so, and that's the difference between help and enabling.
Yeah.
And I think at some point you need to get professional advice. Like I said, lots of great counselors, men and women out there, that you can call and get advice, and then as if it's the oncologist, right? It's like we wouldn't get into the debate with the oncologist. And I'm not saying you don't get a second opinion, none of that, but I'm just saying that typically if enough people tell you, yep, this is the problem and this is the remedy, then that's probably the problem and this is probably the remedy.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, Gary, we always finish these episodes a little differently. We always like to turn the tables to you, and we're both sitting here asking you a handful of questions today. But what questions do you have for us? One or two things maybe on your mind. I know you've known Hillary for a little while. You don't know me, but
Mhm.
what do you have for us, either as a couple or individually, that you want to know?
Well, I think that I actually have known Hillary for quite some time, and I remember when you two were getting married, and
Mhm. And you were at our wedding.
I was at your
Yeah.
wedding. That's right, and it was beautiful. It was up Spanish Fort Can or Hobble Creek, was it
Hobble
Hobble
Creek.
Creek?
Hobble Creek, Ken.
Hobble
Yeah.
Creek, and I remember how beautiful it was, and I don't know that I have a question, but what I will tell you is I'm just so happy for the both of you.
Mhm.
I love Hillary very much, and she was an awesome employee and was very loyal, and she was one of the. It's funny, just because I remember watching the movie Mr. Rogers, right, and this is a movie that I was like, oh man, I don't know about going to this, right, and it was about. He talked about looking for the helpers.
Mhm.
And, Hillary, you've always been a helper.
Oh, thank you.
So I guess that's, and one of the things I would walk in, you'll laugh, Scott, but I would always say to Hillary, every time I walk into the facility, even today, I go, Hillary, how's being married? And she goes, it's great.
You would say that all the time.
Yeah,
It's like
so-
rainbows and unicorns every day.
There you go. I'm happy for you guys. So,
Mhm.
thanks for having me.
No,
Oh,
thank
you're
you.
so
We really
grateful.
appreciate you stopping by and sharing some of your wonderful insight and your stories. I really hope today that, the people listening have taken some of this to heart and are able to use that, some of the advice in their lives. So we really appreciate your time today.
Yeah, cool. Thanks.
So grateful for you, Gary. Thank
Yeah,
you.
love you.
We love you.
Well, everybody, thank you for tuning in again. Hope, again, this episode was just as wonderful for you as it was for us to sit here with Gary Fisher today. But make sure you do like, comment, share this episode with your family or friends, especially those that you know are struggling, especially those that you know are in need of some type of guidance or help in their life. Grab it, hit that share button. Check us out on our social media page as well. Share in the info we're posting there. And don't forget to run over to the Surviving Life's Pickles website. Check out the awesome swag and merchandise we have. Again, that helps us support us. It helps put our word out. And you get to wear some pretty awesome gear once you purchase it. So reach out and check those things out. Thank you for tuning in this week, and we will see you next time.
Thanks, everybody.